Settle in now, little dreamer, and let the world outside your window fade into a soft and distant whisper. Close your eyes and feel the gentle weight of your blankets, a warm and quiet anchor in the sea of night. Breathe in, slowly and deeply, and as you breathe out, let go of the day. Let go of its hurried thoughts, its sharp edges, its bright noises. We are leaving it all behind. Tonight we journey to a time before time, to a place woven from mist and fire, to the very beginning of things. Our path is lit by the embers of dying stars and the frost of newborn worlds. Listen now, listen only to the sound of my voice, and let it be the river that carries you into the vast, silent ocean of sleep. Before there was sand or sea or the cool green grass, before the sun knew its home or the moon its path, there was only a great and yawning void. This void was called Ginnungagap. It was not empty, not truly. It was a space of pure potential, a silence so profound it held all possible sounds within it. It was a darkness so complete it contained every color yet to be born. To the north of this chasm lay a realm of endless ice and mist, a place of creeping cold and frozen rivers, and this was Niflheim. From its heart bubbled the mother of all springs, Hvergelmir, whose waters fed 11 great venomous rivers of ice that flowed slowly, inexorably into the void. To the south lay a realm of eternal fire, a land of roaring flames and molten rock, a place of searing heat and dazzling light, and this was Muspelheim. There, at its edge, stood the giant Surtur, his skin of living lava and his eyes of burning coal, holding a flaming sword that shone brighter than any sun. For ages uncounted, these two realms existed in opposition. The cold of Niflheim crept south, and the heat of Muspelheim crept north. And in the center of Ginnungagap, where the biting frost met the hissing embers, a great change began. The fire licked at the ice, and the ice did not shatter but softened. It began to melt, to drip, and in the drips, life stirred. The drops of melted ice, quickened by the heat from the south, coalesced. Slowly, so slowly that an age of humankind would be but a single breath in its formation, a shape began to form in the twilight of the void. It was a being of immense size, greater than any mountain that would ever be, and it was the first of all living things, the frost giant Ymir. Ymir was not good, nor was he evil, for such things had not yet been conceived. He was simply primal force, a creature of ice and chaos. As he slept in the warm, misty air of the void, he began to sweat, and from the sweat under his left arm, a male and a female frost giant were born. And from his legs another giant was born, a son with 6 heads. These were the first of the Jotnar, the giants, a race as ancient and wild as the elements that formed them. As Ymir slept, another being was formed from the melting ice. This was a cow, a great cosmic cow of impossible size, named Audhumla. Her hide was the color of clouds at dusk, and her breath was a sweet, warm vapor. From her vast udders flowed 4 rivers of milk, and these rivers fed the sleeping Ymir, giving him sustenance. But Audhumla, too, needed to eat. She stood in the vastness of Ginnungagap and began to lick the salty rhinestones that were covered in frost. For a full day she licked, and by evening the hair of a man appeared from the ice. On the 2nd day she licked more, and a head was revealed. By the end of the 3rd day, a complete being had been freed from the salty ice. He was beautiful and strong, and his name was Buri. He was the first of the gods. Buri, in time, had a son named Bor. Bor took for his wife a giantess named Bestla, the daughter of one of the first giants. And from their union, a new generation was born, a new power in the growing cosmos. They had 3 sons. The first was Odin, wise and thoughtful, with a fire in his one eye that sought all knowledge. The second was Vili, who gave shape and sense. The third was Vi, who gave warmth and feeling. These 3 brothers looked upon the vast, chaotic world, with the lumbering Ymir and his brood of brutish giants, and they knew that for a true world to be born, a world of order and beauty, a great and terrible act was necessary. They went to war with Ymir. The battle was a storm of unimaginable fury, a clash of creation itself. The brothers, with their divine strength, fought the great frost giant, and the void echoed with the sounds of their struggle. At last they slew him. It was not an act of hatred, but of shaping, a necessary end to bring about a true beginning. From Ymir's massive body, the brothers began to craft the world we know. They carried his immense corpse to the center of Ginnungagap. His flesh they made into the earth, the soft soil and the deep loam. His blood, which poured from his wounds in a great deluge, became the oceans, the lakes, and the winding rivers that cradle the land. So much blood flowed that it drowned all the frost giants, save for one, Bergelmir, and his wife, who escaped on a wooden box and sailed to the edges of the world, to a place they would call Jotunheim, the land of giants. From them, a new race of giants would descend, forever the enemies of the gods. From Ymir's bones, the brothers raised the mountains, their peaks scraping the new sky. His teeth and the shards of his bones they scattered across the land, and these became the rocks and the stones and the pebbles on the shore. They took his vast, curved skull, and they raised it high above the earth to form the dome of the sky. To hold it aloft, they placed a dwarf at each of the four corners: Nordri in the north, Sudri in the south, Austri in the east, and Vestri in the west. They caught the sparks and embers that flew from Muspelheim, and they scattered them across the inside of the skull, and these became the sun, the moon, and the glittering, silent stars. They gave the sun and the moon chariots to ride across the sky, charting the course of day and night, bringing the first rhythm to the new world. And from Ymir's brain they formed the clouds, which they tossed into the air to drift on the winds. Finally, they took Ymir's great bushy eyebrows and used them to build a defensive wall around the central part of the earth, a place they named Midgard, the Middle Realm, a place intended to be a home for a new kind of being. The world was beautiful now, but it was empty. One day, Odin, Vili, and Ve were walking along the shore of the new ocean. They found 2 logs of wood washed up on the sand, one of ash, the other of elm. They were lifeless and without purpose. Odin, the Allfather, breathed into them the spirit of life, giving them soul and breath. Vili gave them the gift of intelligence, of understanding and feeling, and Ve gave them the senses, the ability to see, to hear, to touch, and the shape of a man and a woman. The first man they named Ask, from the ash tree. The first woman they named Embla, from the elm. From these 2, all of humanity would descend, living their lives within the protective walls of Midgard, beneath the watchful eyes of the gods. But the cosmos was larger than just Midgard. The gods created a realm for themselves, high above the world of men, a shining city of gold and silver called Asgard. To connect the realms, they built a bridge, a shimmering, burning rainbow called Bifrost, which was guarded day and night by the ever-vigilant god Heimdall, whose hearing was so keen he could hear the grass grow on the earth and the wool grow on a sheep. The entire cosmos was held together by a great and ancient tree, Yggdrasil, the World Tree. Its branches reached up past Asgard, into the highest heavens, and its leaves shaded all the worlds. It had 3 immense roots. One root reached down into Asgard itself, and beside it was the Well of Erd, where the 3 Norns, the Fates, sat weaving the destiny of all beings. Their names were Erd, what was, Verdandi, what is, and Skuld, what is to come. Even Odin could not change what they wove. A second root plunged deep into the frozen mists of Niflheim, where the great dragon Nidhogg gnawed ceaselessly upon it, a constant threat to the stability of all creation. The third root extended all the way to Jotunheim, the land of the giants, and beside it was the Well of Mimir, whose waters held all the wisdom and knowledge of the universe. And so the 9 worlds came to be, all nestled within the branches and roots of Yggdrasil. There was Asgard, home of the Aesir gods, Vanaheim, home of the Vanir, gods of nature and fertility, Alfheim, home of the light elves, Midgard, the realm of humanity, Jotunheim, the realm of the giants, Svartalfheim, the underground kingdom of the dwarves, the master craftsmen, Niflheim, the primordial realm of ice, Muspelheim, the primordial realm of fire, and Helheim, a grim, shadowy realm beneath the earth, ruled by the goddess Hel, where the souls of those who died of sickness or old age went. A squirrel named Ratatoskr scurried up and down the trunk of Yggdrasil, carrying insults between the eagle perched at its top and the dragon Nidhogg at its root, a constant messenger of discord. In Asgard, the gods lived in a golden age. Odin, the Allfather, sat upon his high throne, Hlidskjalf, from which he could see all that happened in the 9 worlds. Upon his shoulders perched 2 ravens, Hugin, thought, and Munin, memory, who flew out across the worlds each morning and returned at dusk to whisper all they had seen and heard into his ear. He was a god of wisdom, of poetry, and of war, but his greatest passion was for knowledge. He would sacrifice anything to learn more, to understand the mysteries of the runes and the threads of fate. His wife was the beautiful and serene Frigg, who knew the destinies of all, though she never spoke of them. Then there was Thor, Odin's mightiest son. He was the god of thunder, with hair and beard as red as fire and a spirit to match. He was the protector of Midgard, a loyal and formidable champion of both gods and men. He rode a chariot pulled by 2 goats, Tangrisnir and Tangjoster, and the sound of its wheels was the rumbling of thunder. In his iron-gloved hands, he wielded the most powerful weapon in all the 9 worlds, the hammer Mjolnir, forged by the dwarves. When thrown, it would always return to his hand, and its strike was like a bolt of lightning. And then there was Loki. He was not of the Aesir by birth, but the son of giants, yet he was Odin's blood brother, and he lived among them in Asgard. Loki was handsome, charming, and silver-tongued, but his heart was a tangled web of mischief and malice. He was a trickster, a shapeshifter, an agent of chaos. He could solve problems that no one else could, often problems he himself had created. He was the fire in the hearth that warms you, and the wildfire that consumes the forest. For a long time, his tricks were more amusing than harmful, and the gods tolerated his chaotic presence, for he brought excitement to their long lives. But the seeds of darkness were planted in his heart, and they would, in time, grow to choke the very roots of Yggdrasil. In the early days, Asgard was a place of splendor, but it was open and vulnerable. The gods decided they needed a mighty wall to protect their home from the giants. One day, a stranger appeared in Asgard. He was a master builder, and he came with a proposal. He offered to build a wall around Asgard, a wall so high and so strong that no giant could ever breach it. He would complete this monumental task in just 3 seasons. But his price was steep. He demanded the sun, the moon, and the hand of the beautiful goddess Freya in marriage. The gods were outraged. The price was unthinkable. But Loki, with his clever tongue, saw an opportunity. "Let us accept his offer," he whispered to the others, "but with a condition he cannot possibly meet. Tell him he must complete the wall in a single winter, with no help from any man. If even 1 stone is not in place by the first day of summer, the deal is off, and he gets nothing." The gods agreed. It was a foolproof plan. No one could build such a wall in so short a time. The builder agreed to the terms, with one small request of his own, that he be allowed the help of his stallion, Svadilfari. The gods, thinking little of it, consented. The work began, and to the gods, astonishment. The builder and his horse worked with supernatural speed. By day, the builder would quarry and set enormous stones, and by night, the stallion Svadilfari would haul even greater loads, his powerful muscles straining in the moonlight. The wall grew higher and stronger with each passing day. As the end of winter approached, the gods began to panic. The wall was nearly complete, and it seemed the builder would meet his impossible deadline. They would have to give up the sun, the moon, and their beloved Freya. In their terror, they turned on the one who had gotten them into this mess, Loki. They threatened him with a painful death unless he found a way to sabotage the builder's work. Loki, ever the survivor, promised he would find a solution. That night, as Svadilfari was hauling the final massive stones for the gateway, a beautiful mare, more lovely than any horse he had ever seen, emerged from the nearby woods. She whinnied softly, tossing her head. Svadilfari, forgetting his duty, broke free from his harness and galloped after her deep into the forest. The builder, enraged, chased after his horse, but he could not catch him. The entire night was lost. When the sun rose on the first day of summer, the gateway of the wall was still unfinished. The builder had failed. But in his fury his disguise fell away, and the gods saw him for what he truly was, a mountain giant. He roared with rage, and his true terrible form filled the sky. Thor, who had been away fighting trolls in the east, returned at that very moment. He did not waste time with words or bargains. He raised Mjolnir, and with a single thunderous blow, he shattered the giant's skull, paying him the only wages a giant would ever receive in Asgard. The wall was finished by the gods, and Asgard was secure. Some time later, Loki returned. With him was a strange, gray foal with 8 legs. It was Sleipnir, the child of Loki's knight as a mare, and the stallion Svadilfari. Sleipnir was the swiftest of all horses, and Loki gave him to Odin as a gift, a strange and wonderful result of his trickery. For a time, peace reigned. But Loki's nature could not be contained. He ventured to Jotunheim, and there he took a cruel giantess named Angerboda, the bringer of grief, as his lover. With her, he fathered 3 monstrous children, beings of immense and terrifying power. The first was a wolf of incredible size and strength, named Fenrir. The second was a serpent, so vast it could one day encircle the entire world of Midgard, and its name was Jormungandr. The third was a daughter. One side of her was a beautiful woman, but the other side was a decaying corpse, blue-black and horrifying. Her name was Hel. The Norns, who see all fates, sent a prophecy to Odin. They warned him that these 3 children of Loki would one day bring about the ruin of the gods and the destruction of the worlds. Fearing this prophecy, Odin commanded that the children be brought to Asgard. He dealt with each in turn. The great serpent, Jormungandr, he cast into the deep ocean that surrounds Midgard. There, the serpent grew and grew, until his body was so long that he encircled the entire world, biting his own tail. He would lie there, dreaming in the dark water, until the end of days. Hel he banished to the cold, dark realm of Niflheim. He gave her dominion over the dead, but only those who died of illness or old age. Her kingdom became known as Helheim, a joyless, shadowy place, and she, its grim and silent queen. That left the wolf, Fenrir. The gods were reluctant to kill him on the sacred ground of Asgard, so they decided to raise him amongst them, hoping to tame his wild nature. But Fenrir grew at an alarming rate. Soon he was no longer a pup, but a monstrous wolf the size of a hill. His eyes glowed with a cunning fire, and his jaws were filled with teeth like iron daggers. Of all the gods, only Tyr, the god of courage and law, was brave enough to approach him and give him his daily meal of an entire ox. The other gods watched from a distance, and their fear grew with the wolf. The prophecy echoed in their minds. They knew they had to bind him. They approached Fenrir with a great chain they had forged, called Leidingr. "See this chain, Fenrir," they said playfully. "Let us test your mighty strength. We doubt you can break it." Fenrir, proud and eager to prove his power, agreed. They bound him, and with a single stretch of his powerful shoulders, he snapped the chain as if it were thread. The gods hid their fear behind forced laughter. They forged a second chain, twice as strong, called Dromi. "Surely this one will hold you," they said. "The fame of your strength will be legendary if you can break this." Again Fenrir consented. He allowed them to bind him, and this time he had to struggle. He strained, his muscles bunching like mountains, the earth trembling beneath him. With a mighty roar he shattered Dromi, sending its links flying across the field. Now the gods were truly desperate. They sent a messenger to the dwarves in their deep, dark kingdom of Svartalfheim, the greatest smiths in all the 9 worlds. They asked them to forge a fetter that no power could break. The dwarves, with their secret knowledge, created a binding unlike any other. It was called Gleipnir. It was made from 6 impossible things: the sound of a cat's footfall, the beard of a woman, the roots of a mountain, the sinews of a bear, the breath of a fish, and the spittle of a bird. When it was finished, it was as thin and soft as a silk ribbon. The gods took the silken ribbon to a remote island and called Fenrir to them. They showed him Gleipnir. "We have given up trying to bind you, mighty wolf," they said. "But try this little ribbon, just for sport. If you cannot break something so slight, we will know you are no threat and will let you go." But Fenrir was no fool. He saw the fear in their eyes and sensed the magic in the ribbon. "This looks like no great feat," he said, his voice a low growl. "But I suspect there is some trickery at work. I will not allow you to put this on me unless one of you places his hand in my mouth as a pledge of good faith. If you mean to trick me, then you will lose a hand." The gods looked at each other in silence. None would volunteer. They urged and cajoled, but Fenrir stood firm. At last Tyr, the brave and honorable Tyr, stepped forward. Without a word, he placed his right hand, his sword hand, between the wolf's massive jaws. The other gods quickly bound Fenrir with Gleipnir. The wolf strained and thrashed, summoning all his world-breaking strength. But the more he struggled against the silken ribbon, the tighter it became. He could not break it. He was trapped. When he realized he had been tricked and that the gods had no intention of freeing him, he snapped his mighty jaws shut. Tyr did not cry out, but a grim silence fell as the gods looked upon their bravest companion, now maimed for the sake of their safety. They took the end of the fetter and tied it to a great stone, which they sank deep into the earth. To silence Fenrir's terrible howls, they jammed a sword into his mouth, its hilt on his lower jaw and its point against his upper jaw. There, on that lonely island, the great wolf was bound, drool foaming from his mouth to form a river, his eyes burning with hatred. He would wait there, dreaming of vengeance until the day of Ragnarök, when all bonds would be broken. And Tyr, the one-handed god, became a living reminder of the price of their security, of the cost of breaking an oath, even to a monster. Odin, the Allfather, was not content with the knowledge he possessed. He knew that Ragnarök was coming, a great twilight of the gods, and he sought the wisdom to face it, and perhaps to understand what lay beyond it. His quest for knowledge was a thirst that could never be slaked. He journeyed to the root of Yggdrasil that grew in Jotunheim, to the well of Mimir. Mimir, a being of immense age and wisdom, guarded the well, whose waters held the memory of everything that had ever been. "I wish to drink from your well, Mimir," Odin said. Mimir looked at the Allfather with ancient eyes. "The price of such knowledge is not small, Lord of the Aesir. What will you give me for a single draught?" Odin did not hesitate. He looked at his own reflection in the deep, still water. "I will give you what you ask." He reached up and plucked his own eye from its socket. He dropped it into the well, where it sank into the depths, a permanent tribute to his sacrifice. Mimir then dipped his horn into the water and offered it to Odin. The Allfather drank deeply, and as the water filled him, so did knowledge. He saw the past, the present, and the shadowed paths of the future. He saw the threads of fate, the great battles, the sorrow, and the glimmer of a new beginning. He returned to Asgard with one eye, but with a sight far clearer than before. Yet still, he craved more. He longed to understand the runes, the secret symbols of power that governed creation itself. To gain this ultimate knowledge, he knew he must undergo an ultimate ordeal. He went to the great world tree, Yggdrasil. He took his own spear, Gungnir, and wounded himself with it. Then he hanged himself from a great branch, swaying over the void, a sacrifice of himself to himself. For 9 days and 9 nights he hung there, without food or water, pierced by his own spear, hovering between the world of the living and the world of the dead. The winds tore at him, and the darkness of the void whispered secrets and madness into his mind. On the 9th night, at the very edge of his endurance, as his life was about to fade, he looked down, and in the depths below he saw them. The runes appeared to him, shimmering shapes of power. With a final, agonized cry, he seized them, pulling their knowledge into himself. The rope snapped and he fell back into the world of the living, reborn with the wisdom of the cosmos. He now understood the magic that bound the worlds together, the language of creation itself. While Odin sought wisdom through sacrifice, his son Thor sought to protect the worlds through strength. Thor's greatest adversaries were the giants, and he often traveled to Jotunheim to test his might against them. One of his most famous journeys began with Loki at his side. They traveled in Thor's goat-drawn chariot and took with them 2 human servants, a swift-footed boy named Thialfi and his sister Roskva. They traveled far, into the deepest parts of Jotunheim, and one night they came across a strange, massive building in a vast forest. It had a single, cavernous room, and the entrance was as wide as the building itself. Finding no one inside, they decided to sleep there. In the middle of the night, they were awoken by a tremendous earthquake and a deafening rumbling noise. Frightened, they retreated into a smaller side chamber for safety. In the morning, they went outside and found a giant of truly colossal size sleeping nearby. The rumbling noise had been his snoring. As the giant awoke and stood up, Thor saw that the building they had slept in was not a building at all, but the giant's massive glove, and the side chamber had been its thumb. The giant introduced himself as Skrimir, or Big Fellow, and he seemed friendly enough. He offered to travel with them and to carry their food in his own bag. Thor agreed. But that night, when they stopped to eat, Thor could not untie the knot Skrimir had tied on the food bag. No matter how he pulled, the knot would not yield. In a rage, Thor took his hammer Mjolnir and struck the sleeping giant on the head with all his might. Skrimir stirred. "Did a leaf fall on my head?" he mumbled, and went back to sleep. A second time, Thor struck him, this time with such force that he was sure the hammer had sunk deep into the giant's skull. Skrimir woke again. "Was that an acorn?" he asked, rubbing his head. "There are too many birds in this tree." Finally, Thor, summoning every ounce of his divine strength, delivered a third, cataclysmic blow right on the giant's temple. Skrimir sat up. "I think a bird may have dropped a twig on me," he said. "Are you awake, Thor? It is time to travel." He then pointed them toward a castle in the distance, the stronghold of the giant king Loki, and went on his own way. Thor, Loki, and their companions arrived at the castle, a place so vast it seemed to be built from mountains of ice. Inside, they found the king, Loki, surrounded by giants. The king looked down at them with contempt. "You are small folk," he sneered, "but I have heard tales of your great deeds. To be welcome here, you must prove your worth in a contest of skill." Loki, ever boastful, stepped forward first. "I am the fastest eater in all the worlds," he declared. Loki smiled. "We shall see." He called for a long wooden trough filled with meat to be brought out. At one end sat Loki, and at the other sat a lean, fiery-eyed giant named Logi. At the king's signal, they began to eat. They met exactly in the middle of the trough, and it seemed Loki had tied. But while Loki had eaten only the meat, Loki had devoured the meat, the bones, and the wooden trough itself. Loki had lost. Next, the young human, Thialfi, known for his speed, was challenged to a race. His opponent was a small giant named Hugi. They raced 3 times, and each time, Hugi was so far ahead that he had turned around and was running back to the start before Thialfi had even reached the finish line. Thialfi, the swiftest of mortals, had been utterly defeated. Finally, it was Thor's turn. "What great feat can you perform, mighty Thor?" Loki asked mockingly. "I can drink more than anyone here," Thor boomed. The king ordered a large drinking horn to be brought. "A true warrior can empty this in 1 draught," he said. "Most can do it in 2. No one is so weak as to need 3. Thor put the horn to his lips and drank as deeply as he could, until he was out of breath. But when he lowered the horn, the level of the liquid had barely dropped. He tried a second time, drinking until his lungs burned, but still, the horn was nearly full. In a final, desperate attempt, he drank and drank, but could not empty it. He had failed. "You are not as mighty as they say," Loki taunted. "Perhaps you would prefer a simpler challenge. Let us see if you can lift my cat from the floor." A large gray cat padded into the hall. Thor, humiliated, went to the cat and tried to lift it. He strained with all his godly strength, but he could only manage to lift one of its paws off the ground as the cat arched its back impossibly high. Utterly shamed, Thor roared, "I may have failed at these parlor tricks, but I challenge any of you to wrestle me." Loki looked around the hall. "My warriors would consider it beneath them to wrestle you after such a poor showing. But bring in Ellie, my old nurse. Let Thor wrestle her." An ancient, frail-looking old woman hobbled into the hall. Thor scoffed, but as he grappled with her, he found her grip was like iron. He pushed with all his might, but he could not move her. The more he struggled, the stronger she seemed. At last, the old woman forced the mighty god of thunder down onto one knee. The contest was over. Thor and his companions had been completely and utterly humiliated. They spent the night in the castle, and the next morning, Utgarda Loki escorted them out. Once they were clear of the gates, the giant king stopped them. "Now that you are leaving," he said, "I will tell you the truth. You have been the victim of illusions, Thor. I am Skrymir, the giant from the forest. The knots on my food bag were bound with magic. And when you struck me with your hammer, you did not see that I had placed a mountain between my head and your blows. Go and look at that mountain now, and you will see 3 new valleys, 2 deep and 1 of immeasurable depth. You struck with a force that could have shattered the world. Your contests in my hall were also deceptions. Loki's opponent in the eating contest, Logi, was not a giant, but wildfire itself, which consumes all. Thialfi raced against Hugi, which is the Norse word for thought, and no one can run faster than thought. As for you, Thor," he said, his voice now filled with awe, "your failures were the most magnificent feats of all. The horn you tried to drink from had its other end in the ocean. You drank so deeply that you have created the tides. The cat you tried to lift was no cat, but Jormungandr, the Midgard serpent that encircles the world. We were all terrified when you managed to lift its paw from the sea floor, for you stretched its body to the very roof of the sky. And the old woman you wrestled, Ellie? She was old age itself. No one, not even a god, can defeat old age. That you held her off for so long and were only forced to one knee is a marvel that will be spoken of forever." As Utgarda Loki finished speaking, Thor, enraged at the deception, raised Mjolnir to strike him down. But in that instant, the giant king and his entire castle vanished into thin air. Thor was left standing on an empty plain, humbled, but with a new and deeper understanding of the forces that govern the universe, forces against which even the mightiest strength is no match. But for all the wisdom of Odin and the strength of Thor, a shadow was growing, a darkness that would soon fall upon the golden halls of Asgard. It began, as so many tragedies did, with Loki. The source of this darkness was the death of the most beloved of all the gods, Baldur the Beautiful. Baldur was the son of Odin and Frigg, and he was the god of light, joy, and purity. He was so fair and so good that a light seemed to shine from him. All the gods loved him. But one day, Baldur began to have terrible dreams, dark premonitions of his own death. A gloom fell over Asgard, for if the god of light could be extinguished, what hope was there for any of them? Frigg, his mother, was distraught. In her desperation, she traveled through all the 9 worlds and made every single thing swear an oath that it would not harm her son. She took an oath from fire and water, from iron and all other metals, from stones and earth, from trees and diseases, from beasts and birds and creeping things. Surely now, Baldur was safe. To celebrate, the gods devised a new game. They would gather and throw things at Baldur, stones, axes, spears, and they would all bounce off him harmlessly, leaving him untouched. It was a source of great joy and relief for everyone in Asgard. Everyone, that is, except Loki. He watched the game, and his heart filled with a bitter jealousy. He hated Baldur for being so loved, and he hated the other gods for their happiness. Disguising himself as a frail old woman, Loki went to Frigg's hall. He praised her for her cleverness in making Baldur invincible. "Is it true," the old woman asked slyly, "that everything is sworn an oath to you?" "Everything," Frigg said proudly. "Well, almost everything. There is a little shrub that grows to the east of Valhalla. It is called mistletoe." It seemed too young and harmless to ask for an oath. That was all Loki needed to hear. He went at once, found the mistletoe, and from its wood he fashioned a small, sharp dart. He returned to the field where the gods were playing their game. He saw Hoder, Baldur's twin brother, who was blind, standing at the edge of the circle, unable to participate. "Why do you not honor your brother like the others?" Loki asked, his voice full of false sympathy. "Because I cannot see where to throw," Hoder replied sadly. "Let me help you," Loki said. "Take this little twig and I will guide your arm." He placed the mistletoe dart in Hoder's hand and guided his aim directly at Baldur's heart. Hotter threw it. The dart flew straight and true, piercing Baldur. He fell to the ground, dead. A silence fell over Asgard, a silence so profound it was like the end of the world. The gods were too horrified to speak, too grief-stricken to weep. They looked at Hodr, who stood in confusion, and then they looked at Loki, who wore a faint, cruel smile. They knew who was truly responsible. The light had gone out of their world. The grief of the gods was a storm that shook the foundations of Asgard. They prepared a funeral worthy of the god of light. They carried his body to his great ship, Hrengorni, the largest of all ships. They wished to launch it into the sea and set it ablaze, but it was too heavy for them to move. They sent for the most powerful giantess, Hyrrokin, who arrived riding on a wolf with vipers for reins. With a single push, she sent the ship hurtling into the water with such force that fire flashed from the rollers and the whole earth trembled. Baldur's body was laid upon the pyre on the ship. When his wife, Nanna, saw this, her heart broke from sorrow and she fell down dead. They placed her beside him on the pyre. Thor stepped forward to consecrate the fire with his hammer, and a dwarf named Lit ran in front of his feet. In his grief and rage, Thor kicked the dwarf into the flames. Odin laid his most precious treasure on the pyre, the golden ring Draupnir, which dropped 8 new rings of equal weight every 9th night. Baldur's horse was led onto the ship and sacrificed, to serve its master in the next world. The great pyre was lit, and the ship, a blazing star of sorrow, drifted out into the endless ocean. But Frigg could not accept her son's fate. She asked for a volunteer to ride to Helheim and bargain with the Queen of the Dead for Baldur's return. Hermod the Brave, another son of Odin, offered to go. He mounted Odin's 8-legged steed, Sleipnir, and for 9 nights he rode through valleys so deep and dark that he saw nothing, until he came to the Jol River, which was crossed by a bridge glittering with gold. The maiden who guarded the bridge told him that the road to Hel lay downwards and to the north. Hermod rode on until he reached the gates of Helheim. He spurred Sleipnir, who leaped clear over the massive gates. Inside, he saw his brother Baldur, sitting in the seat of honor. Hermod pleaded with Hel to release him, telling her of the great sorrow that had befallen all the worlds. Hel listened, her face half beautiful, half corpse. "I will test if Baldur is as beloved as you say," she decreed. "If everything in all the 9 worlds, alive or dead, weeps for him, then he may return to Asgard. But if even one thing refuses to weep, he shall remain with me." Messengers were sent throughout the worlds, and everything wept. Men and women wept. The animals of the forest wept. The earth itself wept tears of dew. The stones and the trees wept. The very metals wept as they were melted in the forge. The messengers, their task nearly complete, were returning to Asgard, full of hope. On their way, they passed a cave, where they found a single old giantess sitting. Her name was Thok. They asked her to weep for Baldur. "Thok will weep dry tears for Baldur's death," she cackled. "Let Hel keep what she has." And she would weep no more. And so, because of one giantess's refusal, Baldur was doomed to remain in the cold halls of Helheim until the end of the world. The gods knew then that Thok was none other than Loki in disguise. His malice had not only killed Baldur, but had also sealed his fate forever. The gods' tolerance for Loki was finally at an end. His crime was unforgivable. They hunted him down. He had fled to a mountain and built a house with 4 doors so he could see in every direction. He often turned himself into a salmon and hid in a nearby waterfall. But Odin saw him from his high throne. The gods came for him with a net. Loki tried to leap over it, but Thor caught him in his mighty grip. The salmon was slippery, but Thor's hold on its tail was so tight that it is why salmon have tapered tails to this day. They dragged him to a dark cave. They brought his 2 sons, Vali and Narfi. They turned Vali into a wolf who, in his madness, tore his own brother Narfi to pieces. The gods then took Narfi's entrails and used them to bind Loki to 3 sharp rocks. The entrails turned to iron. The goddess Skadi, whose father Loki had helped to kill, took a venomous serpent and fastened it to the rock above Loki's head, so that its poison would drip eternally onto his face. But Loki was not left to suffer entirely alone. His loyal wife Sigyn remained by his side. She held a bull above his face, catching the serpent's venom, but when the bowl was full, she had to turn away to empty it. In those brief moments, the venom would drip onto Loki's face. He would writhe in such agony that the whole earth would shake. And these are what mortals call earthquakes. There they would remain, the bound god and his faithful wife, waiting for the world to end. And the end was coming. The death of Balder was the first note in the funeral song of the gods. The age of peace was over. The Fimbul winter began. For 3 long years, there was only winter. Snow fell from all directions. The winds were harsh and the sun gave no warmth. Brother fought brother, and fathers killed their sons. The world of men was filled with war and despair. Then the final signs appeared. The great wolf Skull, who had chased the sun across the sky since the beginning of time, finally caught his prey and devoured her. His brother Hati caught and swallowed the moon. The stars vanished from the sky, and the world was plunged into a great and terrible darkness. The earth began to tremble violently. Yggdrasil, the world tree, groaned and shuddered from its roots to its highest branches. The mountains crumbled. Every bond and fetter was broken. Fenrir, the great wolf, was free. Loki, in his cave, was free. From the east, the giants set sail on the ship Naglfar, which was made from the uncut fingernails and toenails of the dead. From the south, the fire giant Surtur advanced, his flaming sword burning brighter than 1,000 suns, turning the very earth to ash behind him. The great serpent Jormungandr, in a rage, rose from the ocean, his thrashing creating tidal waves that flooded the land. He spewed his black venom, poisoning the air and the sea. In Asgard, Heimdall, the guardian of the Bifrost, saw the coming doom. He put the Gjallarhorn to his lips and blew a blast so loud and clear that it was heard in all the 9 worlds. It was the final alarm. The gods knew the time had come. Odin rode Sleipnir to Mimir's well one last time to seek counsel from the wise head. The Aesir put on their golden armor, grabbed their weapons, and rode out of the gates of Valhalla, the Einherjar, the host of valiant mortal warriors marching beside them. They rode down the shaking Bifrost Bridge to the vast plain called Vigrid, where the final battle would be fought. The sky was black, split only by the fire of Surtur's sword. The air was thick with poison and the sound of war horns. The final, terrible clash began. Odin, the Allfather, rode at the head of his army, his spear Gungnir held high. He charged straight for his great nemesis, the wolf Fenrir. The wolf's jaws gaped so wide that his lower jaw scraped the earth, and his upper jaw touched the sky. He would have opened them wider if there had been more room. With a terrifying howl, he swallowed the Lord of Asgard whole. Thor, the mighty thunderer, saw his father fall, but he could not go to his aid, for he had his own ancient enemy to face. He confronted Jormungandr, the Midgard serpent. Their battle was a storm of cosmic fury. Thor, with a final, desperate roar of effort, smashed the serpent's head with Mjolnir. The great beast fell, dead, but as it died, it spewed a torrent of venom all over the god of thunder. Thor staggered back 9 paces, and then he too fell to the earth, dead. The brave, one-handed Tyr faced Garm, the monstrous guard dog of Helheim. They fought with a terrible ferocity, and in the end, they killed each other. The same fate befell the 2 great adversaries, Loki and Heimdall. They met amidst the chaos, their ancient hatred flaring one last time. They fought, and each was the other's doom. Surtur, the fire giant, confronted the beautiful god Freyr, who fought valiantly but had given his magic sword away long ago to win the hand of his giantess wife. Unarmed, he fell before Surtur's flaming blade. Then came the vengeance for Odin. His silent son Vidar, whose shoe was made from all the leather scraps that mortals had ever cut from their own shoes, strode onto the battlefield. He confronted Fenrir. He placed his thick-soled foot on the wolf's lower jaw, and with his immense strength he grabbed the upper jaw and tore the beast apart, avenging his father. But the battle was lost. The field was littered with the bodies of gods, giants, and men. Surtur, his enemies defeated, raised his sword high. He flung fire across the entirety of the earth. The flames leaped up to the heavens. Yggdrasil itself burned. The world groaned, and with a final, Shuddering sigh, it sank beneath the boiling waves of the sea. All was silent, all was dark. The end had come. But do not despair, little dreamer, for this is not truly the end. It is a transformation. Let the image of the dark, silent water fill your mind. Let it be a deep and peaceful pool. For just as a long winter must give way to spring, so too must the end of one world give way to the beginning of another. Slowly, so slowly, out of the sea, a new world began to rise. It was green and beautiful, more lovely than the world that had been lost. The waters were clear, and fish swam in the rivers. The fields grew crops, without needing to be sown. The sun had a daughter, a new sun, even brighter and warmer than her mother, and she began her journey across the new sky. And there were survivors. A few of the gods returned. Odin's sons Vidar and Vali came to the green fields of Ida, where Asgard once stood. Thor's sons Modi and Magni also survived, and they found their father's hammer Mjolnir lying in the grass, ready to protect the new world. And from the shadowy realm of Helheim, two gods returned, their old enmity forgotten. Baldur the Beautiful, the god of light, and his blind brother Hodur walked together in peace. They found, scattered in the tall green grass, the golden chess pieces that the Aesir had played with in the Golden Age, a quiet memory of all that had passed. And they sat and they talked of the old times, of the great deeds and the great sorrows, not with regret, but with the quiet wisdom of those who have seen the turning of the great wheel. And what of humankind? Two mortals had survived the great fire and flood, a man named Lif, and a woman named Lifthrasir. They had hidden themselves deep within the wood of the world tree, Yggdrasil, which had not been entirely destroyed. They slept through the destruction, and the morning dew was their only food. Now they emerged into the new world, into the bright morning of a new age. From them, a new race of humanity will be born, to live in this world of peace and light, a world without sorrow or evil. And so the story ends, but it does not end. It is a circle. A great winter gives way to a gentle spring. A long night gives way to a new dawn. The old world sinks, and a new, greener world is born from its memory. Rest now. Let the story dissolve into your dreams. Let the vision of the new green earth be the field upon which you sleep. The cycle is complete. All is quiet. All is at peace. The new sun is rising, and the world is born anew. Sleep now. Sleep deeply.